Okay, gents, from time to time I do a talk focused on physical health. I keep whatever talks I do within the realm of my own experience, and the talk today is indeed a very personal one for me. I also must grit my teeth and reluctantly issue a disclaimer before I go forward. I have found in my journey through the world of health and nutrition that just like with men's issues in so many other areas of life, there is no shortage of online trolls, radicals, and flame wars over food and nutrition. Since I anticipate that what I will say will draw the ire of born-again ideological vegans and other dick nozzles, I'll say in advance that I'm not offering nutritional advice. I'm simply telling you what happened to me, what I did about it, and the results that followed. And that brings me to the only advice I have about this subject. Do your own homework. Don't trust anyone just because they call themselves an expert, even if they really are an expert. And especially don't trust anyone selling anything. That includes the medical establishment, which has a vested interest in maintaining diseases they can't and don't want to cure. Listening to them will kill you as far as I'm concerned, which makes all this much more difficult. Essentially, guys, when it comes to the bottom line about your health, you're on your own. You must act as your own advocate, which brings me to my story. I've always had issues with my weight. At 6'8" with a large frame, I was always a big guy. But I wasn't just big, I was also fat. From my late 30s to my late 50s, I typically weighed from about 300 to 310 pounds. I constantly rationalized this. After all, I'm really tall, and in younger days I had a massive amount of muscle in addition to the fat. I didn't have a lot of health problems, certainly nothing weight-related. For most of my life, I just didn't worry about it. Then in my early 50s, I grew increasingly fatigued. Nothing remarkable, mind you, just a nagging tiredness that persisted even when otherwise well rested. I wrote that one off too. I was just getting older, and I suppose that the fatigue was just an uncomfortable part of aging. Eventually that got worse, and to the point that I thought something must be wrong. Several trips to the doctors yielded no results. Well, I take that back. It yielded one result that I didn't listen to. I met a doctor at the VA in Houston who told me that I had metabolic syndrome. There's a link to that below. And that the problem was my habits with food. I wasn't about to listen to any of that shit. I did not eat a lot of junk food, just a couple of times a week. Well, maybe more than that. But certainly that could not have been the problem. I had also spent a lot of time off and on eating a mostly vegetarian diet. Part of me knew this doctor was on to something, but as they say, denial ain't a river in Egypt. I went back to eating a mostly vegetarian diet with copious amounts of healthy stuff like rice and pasta, because, that stuff is healthy, not like that evil red meat. And lo and behold, I did start losing weight. I dropped 20 pounds, continued to feel like shit, and continued to approach food like a feminist approaches logic and reason. Other than the increasing fatigue, the only other symptom I had was an occasional, very brief flutter in my chest. I mentioned that to several docs and had even done some EKGs and a cardiac stress test. Nothing ever turned up, and the docs told me it was nothing to worry about. It's funny how well I listened to them when they told me what I wanted to hear. Things took a sharp turn south in December of 2015. About an hour after polishing off a massive bowl of pasta late in the evening, for my health, the chest fluttering started. This time, it didn't stop. Somehow I managed to get a few hours sleep that night, which was periodically interrupted by my heart doing the mamba in my chest. In my head, I started repeating all the things I had heard from my doctors before, telling me not to worry about things. Eventually, the fear of what was happening overrode my idiocy, and I headed for the emergency room. As soon as the nurse took my pulse, I was moved to the head of the line. Now, normally, I like the head of the line. It's a bonus in life that's great when you're renewing your driver's license. It's not so great when you're in the ER. In fact, it's downright scary. After hooking me up to a couple of machines and taking blood and urine, they came back and told me that my glucose was 575. At the time, I didn't know a glucose level from Adam, but it sounded high. They confirmed that with a shot of insulin and an open debate on whether to try to shock my heart back into rhythm. I wasn't particularly amused. Fortunately, within about 15 minutes, my heartbeat stabilized. I noticed something else, other than relief that the defibrillator wasn't being wheeled next to my bed. Laying there in that hospital bed, wires everywhere, my partner sitting next to me with an ominous look on her face, I felt better. In fact, I felt better than I had in years. I even had a mild exhilaration, a sense of well-being that I'd been missing for a long, long time. I had no doubt it was the insulin. So it was less than surprising when they told me I had diabetes. They also told me I had afibrillation, or AFib, an irregularity of the heartbeat that can make blood pool in the heart's upper chambers, sometimes causing minor inconveniences like stroke and death. Needless to say, I felt like a complete idiot, probably because I was. I had had multiple signals from my body for years that I was headed for real trouble, and all I had done was repeatedly seek medical advice, only to ignore anything that did not involve me eating the way I wanted to. Oh, and that weight loss I had experienced? That was the diabetes too. When your body's naturally produced insulin isn't getting glucose into the cells, your body thinks it's starving. It responds by breaking down protein from muscles and fat. I wasn't losing weight because of what I was eating. I was losing weight because my body was eating itself. As far as weight loss plans go, it's about as smart as a raging cocaine habit. That day was life-changing for me. With a newfound appreciation for still being alive, I changed my diet. As a typical American, I was eating over 100 pounds of sugar a year and a ridiculous amount of simple, refined carbohydrates, the kind that comes with enriched, processed food. As I learned later, I could just as well have traded all the rice and pasta for candy bars. It all gets metabolized the same way. I was off and running to low-carb, low-sugar eating. With a good bit of research and a minimum effort, and with no thanks whatsoever to the American Diabetes Association, I was able to eat really great, satisfying meals. Steaks, seafood, smoked meats, and all other sorts of proteins, with abundant butter, cream, and other fats. In short, I ate, and still do, like a king. I wasn't near perfect in my approach, and I'm still not. I allow a cheat day once a week and honestly cheat a little more than that. I just make it a point to stay away from processed foods rich in simple carbohydrates, also known as junk food, also known now as poison. And I mostly avoid all foods rich in simple carbohydrates. Since then, I've lost 50 more pounds. And here's the kicker, lowered my A1C to normal levels in 2 tests spaced 3 months apart. I've just taken one more test. If that returns a normal range A1C, I am going off medications. In other words, I will have put my diabetes in remission by not eating poison. Imagine that. Once I have a year of normal range A1C testing without medications, it will be considered complete remission. I have no doubt that will happen. And all my other blood chemistries are normal. That's a big deal because in the midst of this, I developed high enough cholesterol to be put on statins. My doctor has taken me off them because my cholesterol has been corrected. It's now normal. Oh, and the AFib? it's gone too. Not a single episode since I made all these changes. Not even any of the temporary little flutters I used to experience. Look, here's the point. Diabetes can be a terrible disease, leading to amputations, blindness, heart disease, and death. It is also, in many cases, completely voluntary. It's a chosen disease and likely a chosen death. I just want to let people know about this. And yeah, maybe I want to brag a little bit, but I do want anyone who has concerns, particularly related to diabetes, to know that you can beat this disease one meal at a time, eating delicious, badass food. I should also note the vast difference between type 2 diabetes, which happened to me and to most people, and type 1. Type 2 is a voluntary disease. Type 1 isn't. But regarding type 2 diabetes, the sugar and junk food industry, along with Big Pharma, are causing this epidemic. I could do a dozen videos on that alone with what I've learned over the past 2 years. I should mention, since someone will undoubtedly bring it up, that there's a great deal of debate on whether sugar and carbs actually cause diabetes. A lot of so-called experts will say it's being overweight, not specific foods that cause the problem. To me, it's a distinction without a difference. By eating a low-carb, high-fat diet, and yes, with a good deal of animal protein, I experienced drastic improvement in 3 very serious medical problems. That being said, I'm not claiming this as a panacea. I'm 60. I could croak before I finish writing this script. Then again, I could live another 25 years. For whatever time I have left, I want to feel good and not wake up to a handful of pills every morning. To that end, there's no argument about it. The decisions I've made put me on that very path. I'll stay here till it doesn't work anymore. And that is it for this talk. As always, I do hope you've enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.